the latest episode of the Inchstones Podcast. We are season 2, well on our way through almost half of the season so far. And today I get to bring on a fellow autism mom on the in social media how we first got connected. But what I love about the story of Jennifer Wallace and her account, Caleb's Courageous Travels, is that she was someone who I found and went, she does what I do, where we just go and we say, we're not going to let the world's reaction to our children being just who they are affect how we get out and explore and enjoy this beautiful world. Jen, thank you so much for being here today. I can't wait to have everyone hear your story and why it is such a mission of yours to show and model what it's like to get out of the home and to interact with this world with children like ours.
Great. Thank you. I feel honored to be here. So
Tell
thank you so
me,
much.
when did you start saying, we're not going to let this limit our ability to live outside the walls of our home?
Yeah, it's funny you say that because honestly, when Caleb was born, I was a single mother and I lived in Washington, D.C. and I was in graduate school. So I didn't live near any family. So we were traveling before, I wouldn't say before he was diagnosed with autism, basically. So we kind of started that journey even before that. And I mean, it kind of evolved into then him being diagnosed with autism. And I kind of was like, well, we're just going to keep going with this in a sense. So it was almost like it started before the features even kind of came out. But after I've loved travel. I've always loved travel. And, just the idea of like some of the best memories of your life and the things you cherish are when you're traveling with your family, that one family summer vacation. And I remember when we experienced this. And I just, my heart was like, I just feel like this is what I want for him too. Growing up and even in my younger 20s, like all the experiences I had, I just don't feel like, at least I wanted to try. If that makes sense. Like I've talked to a lot of families that, in the end say, traveling is not just for us. It's not for us. We've tried it. And I'm like, well, great. Being brave and trying is what, is kind of my mission is just at least try and see, but if it's something that ends up being fulfilling and serving you, then I want, families
love
to
what you're saying,
experience that. So.
Just obviously just trying it. There's a lot of discomfort that a lot of families like ours feel in the process of just trying. I was recently flying solo to Florida with the little two, and we're pretty locked and loaded with getting through the airport. Like it's not, and yet I was faced with a completely dead weight son on the floor, would not go through the security machine. And what I'm realizing in those moments is that even after doing this for over a decade now of just traveling with them, I have to know that those moments are still going to happen. I think that that's a fear point, is that at first those are going to happen a lot. It doesn't mean that they're completely extinguished though over time. It's just that it does happen less. Talk to me about how that has evolved with you and with Caleb through the years.
Right. I think 100%. I mean, we don't ever have like a drama-free trip. I mean, there's always a little something happens here and there. I think basically how it's evolved in a sense of my reaction is much better. I mean, these kids feed off our anxiety, so it's this idea of just, I'm going to be prepared, as much as you can. And, that takes, hopefully I'm trying to educate people on how to be prepared, but in the end, practice makes perfect. You just have to keep trying and doing it, and you're going to be more prepared the more you do it and the more you realize this is what my child needs, etc. And then just trying to be, just my reaction being better, calm, collected.
What are some
don't freak out
that you maybe said to Caleb in his younger years that helped, even just in the preparation phases of getting through the security line, ordering food from a different place at the airport, waiting for mom, as papers are being handed over? Like it's such a, like you said, it's such a stressful situation for everyone. I found that just always talking about things as they're coming up has been very, very helpful.
100%.
What would that look like for those of listeners that might not really understand, like, well, what does she mean by talking through it?
Right. I mean, I even start from like weeks before. We have a little calendar because I feel like a lot of times with our kids, I think you do this with neurotypical kids too. You just kind of like, oh, I forgot to tell you we're doing this. You kind of just, forget to tell them the plans. But with our kids, they hear it, they're processing it But I tend, even if as they get older, especially Caleb is 21 now, and sometimes I forget to be like, oh,
Right.
by the way, we're doing this, So I have a calendar that I try to prepare him weeks before we do any kind of travel. He's a part of the packing process, even if it's just
Mhm.
bring up the suitcase, we're getting this together. You see that this is happening. And then, yeah, just kind of talking him through what we're doing as we're going through. All right, baby, we're going to park the car right now. We're going to grab our bags. We're going to go through security. And then, even the biggest things for Caleb is when is he going to eat and when is he going to go to the bathroom? So those things trying to like, okay, we're going to get through security and go to the bathroom and we're going to get a snack, So I feel like just kind of those kinds of preparations, just making sure he's a part of the plan. And that does tend to make him, more calm. So
How have you
that works
handled
for him.
maybe strangers' reactions? No, I know that one of my biggest like vigilant points is always like, okay, assessing who's sitting in front of us, or so the
Right.
seat kicking,
Exactly.
the tray tables coming up and down the seat buckles, always probably I've gotten less, but maybe still in a very hyper vigilant mode about, making sure to say hello to
Right.
those around us. Talk to me about how you've grown as a mother and traveling so much, but what that looks like when you're met with maybe someone who is more reactionary to you and Caleb.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, we do the exact same thing. Try to say hello, almost like talking. I feel like sometimes when I'm
Yeah.
talking to him, I'm talking to everybody around us, like, okay, we're gonna take off now, and keep nice hands, and let's, keep our hands busy with our iPad and our fidget toy,
Right.
and try not to use the tray, So I try to do that kind of thing as well. But yeah, it is sometimes, he loves to undo the
My
tray
son,
table on
yeah.
the chair. He's like, okay, we're just gonna
Mac is a fan
keep
of
his hands busy.
the seat buckle. Like when he just loves the flapping of the seat
Oh,
buckle. And you know what? Like, to be honest, like for the majority of a flight,
oh,
you can't really hear it. It's just that whenever it's quiet and the circulating air is not on and the flight, you're like, this is pretty incessant.
right. Then you're like,
I think a lot of times the fear of travel, from when I hear people ask, like, how do you do it so much? And I hear behind their fear is being so afraid of the world's reaction. Right. And I know, and I really
right.
want to hear your
Yeah.
story on not maybe the sad negative reactions, but what have been some really great positives so that we can use this as fuel.
I mean, right. For every negative reaction I've had, I think I've gotten like 3 positives. I mean, at least. I feel like this is becoming more disseminated in our culture of, people with autism. I mean, the diagnosis is becoming, better because we're, there's not as much fear behind just getting kids help and et cetera. So I feel like there are a lot of people out there that have a family member, my niece, my nephew, and so I just feel like
I
it's almost like
agree.
we're just relating to the world better because it's like, and they see us out there and they're hoping that they're in their heart, they're hoping that I want that for my loved one. I see this woman and yeah, it's maybe not going perfect, but they're doing it and they're, hopefully going on some beautiful trip and making memories. And I'm praying for
Mhm.
that for my own, loved ones. But yeah, we've had so many experiences. And I will tell, and what I try to do the most is just, especially when I get a glare or it's an ugly thing, just try to remember, like, I mean, there's always going to be people doing that for sure and not having good intentions. But there's a couple times where I've thought someone was glaring and they've come up to me after and been like, I just think you're doing a great job. You're a wonderful person. I love what you do. So then I'm like, well, am I superimposing my worries and anxieties on like, am I
Mhm.
seeing the glares? Like, am I making that up? So, and I'm not saying we're all, but there are times where I'm trying to like, just be like, maybe they're
Well,
not glaring. Maybe
I was
maybe
talking with
that's just
someone, I guess it was
what
like the
computer,
first season of the podcast, who did a lot of scientific work on like curiosity and like the mismatch that like we as humans, we are wired to look for mismatches. So there's a facial
yes,
like
yes,
reaction that we then intake because of our experience with children like ours. We're so used to people noticing that we are the mismatch that it becomes almost a bias to us that like we're
right,
so hyper protective then of being like, I see you looking. Whereas that might mean that they're
yeah,
judgmental. It might just mean they're curious and they're trying to figure this out. And I think that,
Right.
one of the ththings that
100%. Yeah.
I do, and I've shared this before, is like I always bring like $5 Starbucks gift cards when we travel on an airplane. I just give them to the row. When I
Oh,
say hello to
that's
the people in
lovely.
front of us, I say, here, this is from us in the row behind you. Mac and Millie both have profound non-speaking autism. Sometimes they can, or they're unable to control their emotions and their bodies. And if they kick your seat, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to do the best I can. And those kind of conversations with the other travelers ends up being beautiful, like you said, and eliciting, I have a niece on the spectrum. Oh, my neighbor is on the spectrum. One thing I wanted to say that even goes beyond that,
Right.
and I'd love to hear what your thoughts are, is that it's not even just about the understanding of autism from what maybe a fellow passenger has, but just simply parents. I've this past year realized so much more about just everyday other parents who seemingly don't have atypical children like we do, saying, you need any help? You're doing a great,
Right.
like, just out of the blue. And that's been one of the
Right.
most beautiful parts of continuing to get out there.
Right. Exactly. No, we've had lots of that experiences. I mean, even people, I've had people
Yeah.
offer, gentlemen, because I'm, single mom. And so
Yeah.
take him Kate to the bathroom and, just these very, small acts of kindness that they do. It is beautiful. And I wish you could, we tend to focus on the ugly. So, it's hard to explain that to people who are afraid, but it does happen. And it is
What would be
really,
some things that
yeah,
at the very
it's
beginning when
wonderful for us.
Caleb was younger really helped? Like, what are the supports, like you were saying, fidgets and his iPad, which I know most of us would think of naturally as an autism mom, but what would be, I guess the next level of like preparation? Like, what were you preloading? What were you sharing with him about where you were going to next? Were you planning situations that were you notifying the airlines? There's so many more programs that have built up since, you've begun your journey, so like a couple months ago. So what did it look like at
Hmm.
first, and how has that evolved?
It's funny you say that. I never even knew up until like the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I didn't know about notifying the airlines,
Well, I love this. Well, now I
which
think
is
on a lot
great.
of airlines,
It's so
you can
exciting that this is
choose
evolving that.
and say like intellectual, disability. You can say that, which I think is a phenomenal option to
Yes,
be able to have in,
yes, yeah, right,
pre-boarding or boarding last. What works for your
right,
family.
right. Exactly, which is great, is awesome. So, but in the beginning, again, just the verbal, trying to prepare him verbally. I know it sounds
Yeah.
maybe silly and trivial, but like snacks, like do never go anywhere without with food. Especially our kids. Caleb's on
Mhm.
a special diet. It's not an allergy, but it's his intolerances. I mean, our bag is half full of food. And in some of these instances, it's a comfort, and if he's, and for us too,
Yeah.
you kind of want a snack when so that's, it's more of a human thing, but preparing him, just making sure I prepare with snacks. And Caleb is a sensory seeking, so he likes lots of touch and rubbing, and so we've done that a lot. Like when he gets anxious, we do lots of tactile stimuli, and just trying to just anticipate that when
Mhm.
he's getting a little worked up, trying to start that early. Yeah, I honestly, like I said, when he was little, I didn't think about notifying the airline, things like that. The only thing I will say that we have
Mhm.
done consistently is make sure
Yes.
there's a window seat. Caleb needs to have a specific seat. With Southwest, when they didn't have, assigned seats, now they are moving toward that, which I'm actually kind of happy. And I don't really want to pay for a seat, but it's, I like the idea of just having the seat. But when they weren't, we would have him, I would go up ahead of time and get a special pass to go pre-board. It was, like you said, on his ticket, it said intellectual disability, because I put that beforehand, which is nice that we can do that now. But yeah, that wasn't there when we
Going back to
started
like the window seat and
doing this.
being able
So
to ask for it, I think that we are so conditioned to have to ask for so many different supports as autism parents and mothers, especially outside of the home. And I
right.
think
Mm-hmm.
99% of the time when you're met with care and concern and how more like how they can help, and that offer of help, like whether you're, in a corralling situation with the airline like Southwest and saying, hey, it really would behoove my child because of XYZ. For the most part, there's so much kindness that's behind wanting to fulfill that for you. And I think sometimes too,
There is.
realizing that you can ask and then not realizing that you can react either way to what's going to be answered to you. It ends up becoming such a
Yes.
fueling skill. And then just like anything, the more that you do it, the more confident that builds behind it. I have to say too, it's interesting. Millie has never
Right.
really, she's been very easy with travel. And I say easy because we've always done it. But Mac has had a much difficult time. And to your point about the window seat, I don't know if this is a boy thing, but man, this last trip, I mean, he was like obsessed with watching the other airplanes. And to be, he's not really into airplanes on TV shows.
Right.
He's very aware of them flying in the sky if they're above
Oh,
us.
right.
But he was glued in and like locked in and thought the whole thing, especially when the jets got going and we were back, those are the moments where I
Right.
think this is why it's worth it. And we haven't even gotten to our destination yet. He had talks like
Yes.
that
100%.
moment
No.
where you
Caleb
realize
loves
staying home
yeah,
was costing us more than the risk of going out, even for that little moment.
exactly. No, 100%. Caleb actually, yeah, he actually
Yeah.
loves any kind of public transportation. I think planes, buses, I mean, everything, trains. And it is this, that's almost the
Right.
experience for him. He actually loves that part of it too. He does love this, like he does better with like having a little bit of noise. I think it's part of the sensory seeking part of him, but like almost like he has two fans on in his room at night.
Yeah.
He likes that little bit of hum. And especially when the plane, yeah, he loves like when the plane starts, he gets
Yes.
like, you can tell he's
Exactly.
excited. He's like, here
Well,
we
that's where
go,
I think that part of
So yeah,
traveling and getting out of the home and heading to a different city that really echoes the most like broadest life lessons we always say is it's not the destination, it's the journey. And these kids sort of like Millie and Mac, particularly, they pull me
exactly.
back into it that yes, it's a lot harder. Yes, I have to be so aware of every different variable and thing that could go wrong and can go right. But they pull you into that moment so much that it does become the journey of just getting to the destination, from whatever that is. When
Exactly,
when
yeah.
have, when were the biggest hurdles for you? As he's aged and gotten older, and what is now like old hat?
Right. The biggest hurdles still are, the meltdowns, that, we've done everything fairly right or there's things that we can't control. This last trip we went on in January, we were delayed. He got a little got a little anxious on the plane or started getting worked up, And so, and as has gotten older, obviously he's much bigger. So he's actually taller than me. So that's where having like rescue meds is important to me. It's even just a peace of mind
Mhm.
and he doesn't always need them. But me having them and knowing that like I can help him, calm down. Sometimes he just needs that. This part of the autism is these kids don't have a self-soothing. Their self-soothing mechanism is not as I say not as developed as other people's, although I do know a lot of
Right.
neurotypical people don't have one either. But just having those medications and if we need them, using them. So that still is that's probably our biggest hurdle that we go through. And I mean, I wouldn't even say I don't know how big that hurdle is because having the medications, I feel like feel like safer about our situation and him having a major meltdown. But yeah, I mean, when things go well, like the flight's going well and things, I mean, he's perfect. I mean, I can't even get over, like, he's just, like, we went, this summer we went to London. It was a direct flight, which was nice, 6 hours. And I mean, not a peep from him because everything just kind of went smooth. So as long, when it comes to like traveling and things working out, like if they do, he is great. And so, and that's kind of our the old hat stuff of just like,
Yes.
he's
Right.
just used to the process of, getting through security, sitting down, getting on the plane, etc. So it's just that the meltdown fear, if something is not going perfect or, a fluke is still there. And we just, again, we try to manage
Jen,
it with
what
the
is
best we
your
can.
reason behind why you even began sharing more on Instagram and as on Caleb's courageous travels? What was your ignition energy behind going, you know what? We're doing something different and I want to be a mirror and help other parents in similar situations.
Right. I just think I just always had this passion for travel. And even growing up as a kid, my dad, initiated that in me. And I come from a very working class family. My parents were, did not have, they didn't travel when they were young and we did travel a little bit, but just my dad loved the idea of travel. And so he kind of installed that in me. And then as I've gotten older, and then I had Caleb, it's just one of those ideas of like, I don't feel like I have to give this up or we should give this up because of, our situation. I don't feel like he should be deprived of that love that I developed as a child and then my dad gave to me. I think this should just be part of our story. But then going out in the world and traveling, you realize, we're the only ones on the plane that
Mhm.
have disabilities, or initially were, we're the only one, and I was like, if I can bring what we're doing to the world and bring more people like us on trips and seeing people, then it becomes less of it becomes less of something that's peculiar or odd or, like out of the ordinary. And people, it just becomes
Yeah.
people's part
Yeah.
of what people see
Well,
all
like
the
to your point,
time.
like, I mean,
And
that's
then it,
what's such a funny dichotomy with the social media and online is that we share online to be a mirror to help others help to be out to do and to practice something that we know that has been so beneficial for us as autism moms. Yet then because it's shared online, that's actually
right,
not real world interaction. So you have to then bring that back. So it's like this back and forth of like, I'm going to share this way, but then I'm going to go out and actually live and I'm going to bring it back and share. And that conscious
yes,
choice is part of the beauty of the global village that we live in now, but it's also this like great heavy weight because,
right,
every mom and child is going to do this differently. For some interaction and travel
right,
is literally to the town over to the playground that finally is fed, right? And I say that from
exactly,
from from a place of
right,
like, do those small things to continue to just interact and to get out so that when if travel and a plane
exactly,
ride seems like insurmountable right now, do the small things that just get you out to potentially have that on as a desire and goal for down the road. I was talking to a mom at swim lessons a few days ago
exactly.
whose
Yes.
child happens to float around with Millie and Mac in town at different therapies and was flying for the first time. And I said, I have to be honest, like he's like on fire with life. Like I can't see him being anything but like an
Mhm.
amazing little angel on the flight. And she kind of laughed and said, part of it is really just building our own selves up to do it. She's like, I'm sure that he could have done this years ago. But it also took
Exactly.
me believing in myself. And I think that's maybe part of this whole thing is like believing that you can do it too. Talk to me about where your
Oh yeah,
own
like
internal
100%.
motivation comes from. And I know you shared about your family and how you were raised, but it's not just believing in the child, it's also believing in yourself.
It is believing your yes, exactly. Do have a little bit of delusional self-confidence that my parents instilled in me too.
Yep. Yep.
I'm great. I can do this. Even when I was, younger, there were a couple times in sports, my mom was like, how we told you you could do anything? You probably just shouldn't do this because you're not good at this. So some of that does come from that. But I will say, I remember my parents helped me raise Caleb, and my dad did pass, but when when Caleb was younger, and I would worry, um, about the plane rides or the travel. And, you know, I think it's just this idea of just try it. Just try. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen? I mean, so we get to the airport, he has a huge meltdown, then we just
Yeah.
don't go on the trip and we try again. It's like the world is not going to end. Your child having a meltdown with, it feels at the moment in the moment you feel like it is, but really, you have to look back and be like, we've had lots of meltdowns and we've gotten over it,
When
and
we've
we've
survived
gotten
our
through it.
hardest days.
Like just this idea of yeah, exactly. We survived all of them. So just this idea of just try, and give it a whirl and see what happens. And I would not say I'm perfect at it. I mean, it's just one cute little experience. We just went on a cruise for Caleb's 21st birthday. And on this birthday, I wanted him to
Yeah,
try this.
yeah.
They had one of those wave flow rider things. Yeah. So I wanted him to try the boogie board, and I signed him up, and I get up there and I'm like, he can't do this. We can't do this. Wait, what am I thinking? I mean, you're an idiot. He's going to hurt himself. He's going to look like a crazy, and so the whole time I'm standing in line thinking this, but I'm like, I don't know. We're just going to do it, you know. And of course they
Yeah.
go over like all the worst case scenarios because they're legally responsible. Yeah. They're like, yeah, you could, and so, but sure enough, I get him on there and it doesn't go perfect, of course. And he
Yep.
has a hard time understanding how he has to lay on there. But man, I'll tell you, he got out there and he was on that thing for like 3 minutes and just living his best life. I know he loved it. And I mean, he did it. And I was like, this is another example,
Just
Jen, of
try.
just
Everything's going to put up
try,
every
like
barrier to say, don't do it.
just try.
Every barrier. Um,
Right.
Again, going back to like the good
Right.
people of the world, like, yeah, they're legally bound to say what's going to go wrong, right? We understand that from being parents that like, yeah, there are things that are
Right.
going to go wrong and they have to be protective of their companies. I think for the most part, the more in which that families like yours and mine live out loud and share our truth, there's more accommodations to help make things like this possible. And I think that one of the things that I want to just
Exactly. No.
always
Yeah.
shout from the rooftops, you know, TSA Cares. I'm not sure if you've ever used that for Caleb, but man, I mean, I used
Yes.
it a lot
Yes.
more in the earlier days with traveling with them. I don't so much anymore with TSA PreCheck and just sort of
Mhm.
our experience and strength going to do it now. But I say that is that there really are programs out there, and I
Yeah.
think, and I want to make sure I'll put in the episode summary that about this too. You don't have to do all this alone. Every company, every part of the travel experience, companies are catching up to this. I think that it does. I know that so much of
They
it is a
are.
double-edged sort of
Right.
like, well, that's more energy to plan and it's more energy to do, but it does alleviate and will help the process go smoother for like a little bit more of like preparation energy. And I'm really happy. That's something that maybe
Right.
seems small to typical families, but it's never lost on me, the TSA program.
No, exactly. Yeah, just having and just having those,
Yeah,
it's almost like your little
exactly.
feather, Dumbo and his little feather. Just having that, knowing it's there. You may not use it and, you may
Exactly.
not even need it,
Exactly.
but just having these,
Exactly.
like
Well,
the
Jen, I
possibility of
really
them
am so
being there.
thankful
Yeah.
for discovering you and what you're sharing about traveling the world with Caleb. And you are
Yes, you too.
one example as to why it makes the world better for being able to see in reality the fullness and the full life of what it is to be a mother of children with autism, but also what the possibilities are if we can just get outside and take that next right step forward.
Yes, thank you.
Um, Continue to share. And for everyone
Exactly.
listening, I will be sharing
Wonderful.
all of the ways which you can find Jen and follow her story and Caleb's online on Instagram, and as well as some of the programs that she and I have both found to help aid in easier and more accessible travel for our kiddos.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for
Well,
doing this too. This is wonderful that
thanks,
you have this
Jen. Thank you.
podcast, and
Well,
I just
until
love
next
it.
time,
It's
everyone,
awesome.
here on the Inchstones Podcast.